So when you think of African history, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of people, the story seems to start with, well, with other people showing up. Explorers, missionaries, guys in pith helmets. It's almost like the continent was just sitting there in the dark, waiting for the lights to be turned on. But here's the thing, and honestly, it's a big thing. That's not just wrong, it's a wild understatement of one of the most epic stories in human history. The lights were on, the party was going, and frankly, some of the best stuff had already happened. So today, let's explore Africa's rich and diverse history before colonization. We're going to peel back the layers of misconception and, frankly, the boring, incomplete version of history many of us were fed in school. We're talking about empires so wealthy they made modern billionaires look like they're searching for loose change in their couches. We're talking about universities that were the envy of the world, cities of stone that defy explanation, and art so sophisticated it would make the Renaissance masters blush. This isn't just about correcting the record. It's about giving credit where it's long overdue. Africa wasn't a blank slate, it was a canvas already filled with masterpieces of human achievement. So buckle up, we're about to go on a journey, a time-traveling safari, if you will, to a continent teeming with innovation, culture, and power. We're going to look at the stories, the people, and the civilizations that flourished for thousands of years. This is the Africa you should know, the one that stands on its own, proud and accomplished. And trust me, some of these facts are so mind-blowing, you'll wonder why they aren't blockbuster movies. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with the big one, the one everyone sort of knows, ancient Egypt. But here's the thing, we think we know it, but we really only know the tourist version. We see the pyramids and the Sphinx, and we go, wow, big triangles, cool cat-lion thing. But this was a civilization that was doing advanced mathematics, while much of the world was still figuring out that pointy sticks were useful. They had a written language, hieroglyphics, that was part art, part literature, and part official government form, which, let's be honest, is more than you can say for most government forms today. They weren't just building tombs, they were building a society with complex social structures, a deep understanding of astronomy and medical practices so advanced they were performing surgeries. This wasn't just a kingdom, it was a superpower of the ancient world for nearly 3,000 years. Think about that time frame. The United States is, 250 years old? Egypt's run was more than 10 times that. They had dynasties, political intrigue, massive public works projects, and a religious system so intricate it makes Game of Thrones look like a children's book. They engineered the Nile's floods to create a breadbasket in the desert, developed paper from papyrus, and created a 365-day calendar that is the basis for the one we still use. So, when we talk about Egypt, let's remember it's not just about pharaohs and mummies, it's about one of the foundational pillars of human civilization, born and bred in Africa. Now let's talk about money. No, not just money, but I have so much gold it's literally become a problem kind of money. Meet Mansa Musa, the emperor of the Mali Empire in the 14th century. This man was so ridiculously wealthy that historians today can't even properly calculate his net worth. They just throw up their hands and say indescribably rich. In 1324, he decided to take a trip, a pilgrimage to Mecca. But Mansa Musa didn't just book a flight on Expedia. He took a caravan that stretched as far as the eye could see, with tens of thousands of soldiers, civilians and slaves, and camels loaded with so much gold that he was just giving it away to the poor as he passed through cities like Cairo. He gave away so much gold, in fact, that he single-handedly crashed the gold market in the entire Mediterranean region for over a decade. Imagine being so rich you cause a regional economic crisis just by being generous on your vacation. That's a flex. But the Mali Empire wasn't just about one rich guy. It was a sophisticated state that controlled trans-Saharan trade routes, dealing in gold, salt and knowledge. Its influence was vast, stretching across West Africa, and it was a beacon of stability and prosperity. Mansa Musa's wealth wasn't just for show. It was a reflection of a powerful, well-organized, and economically dominant African empire. So, with all that gold from the Mali Empire, what do? Well, if you're Mansa Musa and his successors, you invest, not in stocks, but in something far more valuable: knowledge. This brings us to the legendary city of Timbuktu. Forget the stereotype of some remote, dusty outpost. In its heyday, Timbuktu was one of the world's great intellectual and spiritual capitals. It was home to the University of Sankore, which wasn't a single building, but a collection of independent schools and colleges. Scholars, poets, mathematicians, and scientists flocked here from all over Africa and the Middle East. They didn't just study religion. The curriculum included law, medicine, astronomy, rhetoric, and art. The city was famous for its book trade. Scribes would meticulously copy texts, creating vast libraries filled with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. In the 16th century, the books traded in Timbuktu were more profitable than almost any other commodity. Think about that, a society that valued books and education more than gold. This was a place where debates on philosophy could be heard in the streets and where the latest scientific theories were being discussed. Timbuktu was the Oxford, the Harvard, the Ivy League of its time, situated right in the heart of West Africa. Imagine wandering through southern Africa hundreds of years ago and stumbling upon a massive city made of stone, with towering walls and conical towers, all built without a single drop of mortar to hold them together. You'd think you'd found a lost city of giants, but you would have found Great Zimbabwe. Built between the 11th and 15th centuries, this was the capital of a powerful kingdom, home to as many as 20,000 people. The name Zimbabwe itself means great houses of stone in the Shona language, and they weren't kidding. The most famous structure, the Great Enclosure, has walls over 11 meters high and 250 meters long. This wasn't just a fort, it was a political and economic powerhouse. The people of Great Zimbabwe controlled the trade of gold and ivory from the interior to the Swahili coast, making them incredibly wealthy and influential. For years, when colonial settlers first saw the ruins, they refused to believe that local Africans could have built something so sophisticated. They came up with all sorts of wild theories, from ancient Phoenicians to the Queen of Sheba. It was pure denial because the evidence was clear. This was a triumph of indigenous African architecture and engineering, a silent stone testament to a forgotten empire. We all know about the pharaohs of Egypt, but have you heard about the Black Pharaohs? Let's go south along the Nile to the land of Nubia in what is now modern-day Sudan. Here, the powerful kingdom of Kush thrived for centuries. This wasn't some backwater neighbor to Egypt. Kush was a major regional power in its own right, with its own distinct culture, language, and even its own style of pyramids, taller and steeper than the Egyptian ones. They were masters of ironworking and controlled key trade routes for gold, ivory, and ebony coming out of sub-Saharan Africa. But here's where the story gets really good. For a long time, Egypt controlled Kush. But then, the tables turned. In the 8th century BCE, the balance of power shifted. The Kushite kings, seeing Egypt in a state of political chaos, marched north. But they didn't come just to plunder. They came to restore order. The Kushite king Paya conquered Egypt and established the 25th dynasty, ruling as the Black Pharaohs. They saw themselves not as foreign conquerors, but as the true heirs to the pharaonic tradition, aiming to bring back the glory days of the new kingdom. It's one of history's great Una-reverse cards. The colonized becoming the ruler, not out of revenge, but out of a sense of duty to the culture they had long admired. When we think of great art history, our minds usually jump to Europe, the Mona Lisa, the Statue of David. But in West Africa, in what is now modern-day Nigeria, the Kingdom of Benin was creating some of the most technically brilliant and artistically stunning sculptures the world has ever seen. I'm talking about the Benin bronzes. These weren't just statues. They were a royal archive, cast in metal. They were intricate plaques and life-sized heads made of brass and bronze that decorated the Oba's or king's palace. Each one told a story chronicling the kingdom's history, its spiritual beliefs, and major court events. The level of craftsmanship is just staggering. They used a sophisticated casting technique called the lost wax method to create pieces with incredible detail, capturing the texture of skin and the patterns of clothing. When British forces looted thousands of these pieces in 1897 and brought them to Europe, the art world was stunned. Many couldn't believe that Africans were capable of such sophisticated metallurgy and artistry without European influence, but they were. The Benin bronzes are a powerful reminder of a society that placed immense value on art, history, and the skill of its artisans, creating a legacy in bronze that has lasted for centuries. Long before the internet connected the world, there was another network, a vibrant web of trade and culture that stretched across the Indian Ocean. And at its heart was the Swahili coast of East Africa. From modern-day Somalia all the way down to Mozambique, a string of bustling city-states like Kilwa, Mombasa and Zanzibar flourished for centuries. These weren't just isolated towns, they were cosmopolitan hubs, a real melting pot of African, Arab, Persian and Indian cultures. You could walk through the streets of a city like Kilwa and honestly hear a dozen different languages being spoken. These cities grew rich by acting as the middlemen, the crucial link between the African interior and the rest of the world. They traded gold, ivory and iron from places like Great Zimbabwe for silk and porcelain from China, spices from India and cotton from Persia. But this trade didn't just bring goods. It brought ideas, religion and technology, leading to the birth of the Swahili language and a unique blended culture. The ruins of their stone mosques and grand houses, some built from coral, still stand today as a testament to this golden age of global trade, driven and dominated by African ingenuity and enterprise. When you think of Rome's greatest rival, what name comes to mind? For most people, it's Hannibal and his elephants. But where was Hannibal from? Not Italy, not Greece. He was from Carthage, a massive maritime empire based in modern-day Tunisia, right on the coast of North Africa. Founded by Phoenician colonists, Carthage grew into a dominant power that controlled trade throughout the entire Western Mediterranean. They were brilliant sailors, shrewd merchants, and fierce warriors. For centuries, the Mediterranean wasn't a Roman lake, it was a battleground between two superpowers, Rome and Carthage. The Punic Wars between them were the ancient world's equivalent of a world war, a struggle for total domination. And Carthage came incredibly close to winning. Hannibal's legendary trek across the Alps with his army and war elephants to attack Rome on its own soil is one of the most audacious military maneuvers in all of history. While Rome eventually won, the fact that this African-based empire could challenge and nearly defeat what would become the most powerful empire in European history speaks volumes. Carthage was a testament to North African power, ambition, and strategic brilliance. Let's dig deep into the past, way back to around 1500 BCE. In a region of what is now central Nigeria, a mysterious and sophisticated culture emerged, known today as the Nok. We don't know what they called themselves, but we know them by the incredible art they left behind. Miners in the 1940s began unearthing life-size terracotta sculptures, unlike anything seen before. These sculptures are some of the oldest examples of figurative art in sub-Saharan Africa, depicting heads with elaborate hairstyles, expressive faces, and detailed jewelry. What's mind-blowing about the Nok is not just their art, but their technology. Archaeological evidence shows that they were among the earliest iron smelters in West Africa, developing furnaces to forge tools and weapons as early as 500 BCE. This was a major technological leap, happening independently of what was going on in Europe or the Middle East. The Nok civilization represents a crucial, yet often overlooked chapter in African history. They were artistic pioneers and technological innovators, laying the cultural and technological groundwork for later West African kingdoms, a silent but powerful civilization whose legacy is still being unearthed from the Nigerian soil. In many historical narratives, women are often relegated to the sidelines, but in many pre-colonial African societies that was absolutely not the case. Women held immense power and influence, not as exceptions, but as an integral part of the social and political structure. In many kingdoms, you had the institution of the Queen Mother, who was often as powerful, if not more powerful, than the king himself. She would have her own court, her own councillors, and a critical voice in major state decisions, including who the next king would be. She was the check and balance to the king's power. And then you have the warrior queens, literal legends who led armies into battle. Women like Queen Amina of Zazzau, a Hausa warrior queen in the 16th century who expanded her kingdom's borders through conquest, or Ya Asantewa of the Ashanti Empire, who led a rebellion against British colonialism in 1900. Beyond royalty, women were often the backbone of the economy. In many cultures, women controlled the local markets and trade networks, giving them significant economic independence and social standing. The idea of women being solely confined to the home is a narrative that in many cases was imported later. In pre-colonial Africa, power had many faces, and many of them were female. So there you have it, 10 glimpses into a history that is vast, complex, and profoundly impressive. From the mathematicians of Egypt and the scholars of Timbuktu to the metallurgists of Benin and the engineers of Great Zimbabwe, the story of pre-colonial Africa is one of brilliant innovation and achievement. This isn't just black history, this is human history, and it's a story that belongs to everyone. The problem is that for too long, these chapters have been ripped out of the book, leaving us with an incomplete and frankly dishonest picture of the world. What we've talked about today is just the tip of the iceberg, or maybe the tip of the pyramid. There are hundreds more kingdoms, cultures, and stories waiting to be discovered and shared. I really encourage you to dig deeper, read the books, watch the documentaries, and question the simple narratives you've been taught. Ask why the story of Mansa Musa isn't as well known as that of Alexander the Great. Ask why the University of Sankora isn't mentioned alongside Bologna or Paris. The answers to those questions are as important as the history itself, because ultimately Africa's story is one of innovation, resilience, and greatness. Long before colonization, it's a story of powerful queens, genius artists, and globe-trotting traders. It's a story that didn't need saving or discovering. It was already there, shining brightly. By learning and sharing this history, we don't just give credit where it's due, we build a more complete and accurate understanding of our shared human journey. Thank you for watching.